I really appreciate the work that you've done and your coming here. You made reference to the very low-level offenses, such as riding bicycle on the sidewalk and so on. And one of the questions I have is, have you pushed for the City Council to review their ordinances in terms of what is an arrestable offense and what is not an arrestable offense? A second aspect of that, here in this area we have things called city courts, and people who receive citations for municipal offenses, low-level citations, are supposed to appear in city court if they don't plead guilty and pay the fine. And the cities usually claim that nobody goes to jail because of a city court violation. But if you're late for the hearing at the court, if you don't show up for the court, there are numerous ways by which you could be cited for contempt of court, and that will land you in the jail. So I think here one of the things that we haven't done yet but need to do is go over this question of these city ordinance effects, which are having an impact which I think city councils didn't anticipate. Have you been addressing that in New Orleans?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's one thing to advocate that we should have a smaller jail. You have to also be able to provide what the blueprint is to get there. So that was one of the things that we were doing, was looking at what were the reasons that so many low-level offenses were ending up with people spending so much time in jail. So we advocated at actually every body that had some responsibility. So one of the things that we first went after was the practice of what offenses the New Orleans Police Department, which, by the way, is one of the most notoriously corrupt in the country, what they were actually arresting for. And made the case that it was not only a bad use of taxpayer dollars, but also a bad use of police time. That, we were spending so much time having, police officers focus on booking people through for riding their bike on the sidewalk or, having a broken tail light. And so with the mayor working with the police chief just to change the policy, he changed one policy, which is that if you had an outstanding traffic attachment or an outstanding traffic ticket from a different parish or county, that you would not be booked through the New Orleans jail. There was, in 1 year, 20,000 less arrests. So 20,000 less arrests just because of one policy change from the mayor, directive to the New Orleans police chief. And obviously, that's 20,000 less bookings through Orleans Parish Prison. So we also looked at what the council could do, and we brought the Vera Institute of Justice, which is an organization out of New York that kind of works to improve criminal justice systems, to do an analysis of our jail population. One of the recommendations that they made was that we should be charging marijuana offenses as a municipal offense. We got the district attorney to agree to that. The city council unanimously passed an ordinance to move the marijuana offenses into municipal court, and have also tried to start, and in the last 2 years have started a program of pretrial services, which is basically a more objective way to evaluate whether someone actually poses a safety risk and should be detained or not. Because the way that it has happened is that if you have a private attorney who can call the judge and say, let this person out, the judge has gone ahead and said, okay, released on their own recognizance. Or if you had the money for bail. Now with pretrial services, we've been looking at, okay, can there be a set of intake staff that is actually talking to each defendant and then submitting their recommendation, or submitting basically the information to the judge, who can make a more informed decision about, is this person a flight risk or not and poses a risk to public safety. And in just the first year or so, it saved, I think, about $3 million because of the increase in number of people who were out. So we're having a lot of problems still implementing that at the scale that it should be implemented, and that's kind of what I spoke about in terms of how you change the culture of institutions, and, give confidence to the judges who, are elected and get all of their campaign contributions from the bail bond industry and private attorneys and don't necessarily want to change this dynamic, how we actually make them kind of go with the changing times is still a work in progress, but we've certainly seen some significant there. And so, yes, that's absolutely it. It's, the effort from the community is kind of at all levels. It's one, to make the broad public understand what the trade-offs are of supporting such a big jail and that it doesn't help improve public safety. But then it also is ensuring that the police chief, the mayor, the council, the judges are all implementing the policies that they need to do to actually see a reduction in the number of people going in, particularly for low-level offenses.
I love New Orleans. My wife and I visit it annually for the last 40 years. My question relates to New Orleans pre- and post-Katrina. Can you speak to the rate of African-American juvenile incarcerations from the 9th Ward and the number of public schools in the 9th Ward before Katrina, and how many public schools have reopened in the ward since Katrina?
So, I mean, the 9th Ward in general has not been rebuilt to the level that it should be and that community residents of the 9th Ward are struggling for. It's been interesting to watch, actually, what efforts are really coming to fruition in the 9th Ward are actually absolutely driven by the efforts of folks who are starting community gardens, starting community centers, working with private donors, including Brad Pitt, to build a whole series of homes. But it's really been something that 9th Ward residents, kind of by hook or by crook, have been rebuilding that part of the city. And I know that actually the question of schools and jails is something that we talked about all the time, particularly in the early days after the hurricane, when I remember you would look around, and we do a lot of work with the juvenile detention center in New Orleans called the Youth Study Center, which is it's a misnomer that's the name. But the Youth Study Center is by the St. Bernard Housing Projects and right across the street from a school. And in 2007, the St. Bernard Housing Projects were flooded and closed. The school was flooded and closed. But the Youth Study Center, the Juvenile Detention Center, had been reopened. And there were all these kids sitting in the center who were complaining about mildew and rat infestations, and they were cooking out of a trailer, so it was like literally spoiled meat and maggots in the beans. I mean, it was actually absolutely filthy. And we really wanted to draw the point of, what kind of trade-off is this, and what does this indicate about our priorities in rebuilding when our schools are shut down, but our jail is open. We did a second line, actually, from the Youth Study Center to a shut-down school with a number of New Orleans brass bands, really saying, shut the Youth Study Center down and open the schools back up. And by the way, we actually have seen some real progress in rebuilding that juvenile jail. That was 80 beds pre-Katrina, and the new facility they're working on has the capacity for less than 40. So that's also a result of the community efforts to say, let's rebuild it differently. The question of the rebuilding schools in New Orleans is a whole other one. I'd say that in every aspect of the city of New Orleans, the storm provided an opportunity to rethink things, and some of that has been for better and some of that has been for worse. And it's another area that my organization looks at right now, is particularly with about 80% of New Orleans children in the charter school system, how we ensure that we're not losing too many kids through disproportionate rates of suspension and expulsion. That is a problem that we've seen in the wake of the storm. And so we've done a lot of effort there as well.